Iran attack?
Yes, I think we are still, I have said this pretty clearly from a few folks that have asked in the room, but we're still talking to them about their response. I'm just not going to speculate further on what that might look like.
Lastly, nowadays Iranian proxies in Iraq frequently attack Israel. I mean, they launch drones and missiles toward Israel. Do you think they shifted their strategy from attacking U.S. personnel and attacking Israel?
I'm sorry, was the first part of your question on groups in
Iranian proxies in Iraq
and Syria?
They frequently, launch drones towards Israel. And do you think they changed their strategy to attack Israel rather than U.S. personnel in Iraq?
I think we've seen them attack, whether it be U.S. forces or try and launch attacks towards Israel pretty much from the beginning. I can't speak for their strategy. I'm certainly not going to speak on behalf of those groups. But we've seen this type of behavior pretty consistently from the beginning. And what you've also seen us do is continuing to engage and shoot down, whether it be missiles or drones that are launched, whether it be from Iraq or Syria. Our forces have shot those down before and will continue to do so in our self-defense and also in Israel's. Yeah.
Is there any discussion between this building and the Iraqi government over the Iraqi militia group's involvement into this conflict? We saw the Iraqi Prime Minister send a public message to President Biden, and he was talking about to shielding Iraq from this conflict. So is there any discussion between you and the Iraqi government to rein these groups and to make Iraq stay away from this war?
I don't have any conversations to read out from the secretary, but we're certainly always in touch with our Iraqi counterparts. Something that, what you've heard us say from, since these attacks started launching on October 17th was that we would take measures to defend our forces. That's what we're going to continue to do. And we're going to keep saying that both publicly and privately because we will take defensive measures if we are attacked.
Another question on Iraq. ISIS has increased its activity in Iraq, especially in disputed area between the Kurdistan region and Iraq. On Wednesday, in an ISIS ambush in Kirkuk killed 4 Iraqi soldiers. So what's your latest assessment on ISIS threats, and do you think the conflict in the Middle East has any impact on the resurgence of ISIS in Iraq?
The conflict, the regional tensions, of course, are going to have an impact on how groups calculate and consider their attacks, whether it be on U.S. forces or other governments in the region. The threat of ISIS has certainly evolved from what it was, 10 years ago. Today, that threat looks different, which is why you've seen us change our relationship and the involvement from the global coalition to defeat ISIS. The military arm of that is changing to a bilateral security agreement with the Iraqi government. That is a phased approach. It's going to take time. During these conversations, no one is under the impression that ISIS isn't still a threat in the region. It's how that threat has changed over the course of time. So yes, acknowledging that ISIS still remains a threat. And that's why you have U.S. forces that are partnered with Iraqi security forces to defeat that threat of ISIS and to ensure their defeat going forward. Yeah.
Thank you, Sabrina. I will go back to Mr. Golan's visit issue. Despite that, you mentioned that you have good communication with them, and 2 ministers, they call each other very often. The secretary declared that he caught off guard when they killed Hassan Nasrallah. So, given the sensitivity of these times that Israel could attack Iran and other issues on the table, are you confident that you won't be caught off guard again under these circumstances?
We're confident that we're going to continue to engage the Israelis, whether it be here in person at the Pentagon or over the phone. Again, when it comes to their response, I'm just not going to speculate any further. Nancy.
I had 2 questions.
Sure.
Israel conducted strikes in a suburb in Damascus. Was the U.S. in any way involved in those strikes, providing any support?
I'm sorry, I'm not tracking the strikes, so I just don't have more to provide at this time.
And then there were intercepts conducted by the U.S. during Iran's ballistic missile attack on Israel. Do you have an update on how many of those were successfully able to stop missiles from reaching Israel?
I don't have an assessment yet. I know that was ongoing, and that Central Command was doing their assessment. I think, given also the hurricane, there's some there might be some delays in us getting you some information. I'm happy to follow up with. I'm sure everyone is interested, so I'm happy to follow up on that. But I would, also leave it to CENTCOM to allow them to finish their assessment, and it might just take a little bit more time. Yes.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sabrina. Has the U.S. military has had any discussion with Pakistan in case things flare up between Israel and Iran?
There's always mill-to-mill communications and conversations that happen. I'm not tracking anything at the secretary's level, though.
Okay. This Indian senior journalist claimed that there are about 15,000 Indian contractors in Israel right now. Do you think having more of these contractors would have decreased the number of children and innocent people killed in Gaza if this approach of ground troops was decided in the early days?
I just don't have anything to add to that, and I'm not aware of contractors being on the ground or.
Ground operations since day one in Gaza. Do you think that would have decreased the number of innocent being killed or no?
By different countries.
Israel having a small military, if they had these contractors, like right now they have about 15,000 of them from India. Do you think that would have decreased the number?
I just can't speculate on the past, and I'm not aware of, contractors and how that would play into the approach. Again, for Israel's operations and how they're conducting their own operations, whether it be in Gaza or on the border, I'd refer you to Israel to speak to that.
Just last question. Just right now, I'm coming from the State Department. My colleague Rita had asked Matt this question that 23 years ago, the U.S. went to Afghanistan because of Al-Qaeda. And today there are reports that Al-Qaeda is again growing in that region. I have raised this question. I've been raising this question for a year now. Pakistan and the Afghanistan and the U.S. Afghanistan and Pakistan foreign offices are now even having tussle with each other. In the midst of all this, is the Pentagon taking this at all serious that Al-Qaeda is growing to a strength where over the horizons operations might not be enough to tackle this challenge?
We certainly take it seriously. We remain incredible capability in the region, which, as you mentioned, include over the horizon capabilities. Don't have more to add. Jared, did you have something?
Yes, I want to clarify something at the top. You mentioned the DoD was just informed of the defense minister's postponed visit. Did the
I'm not going to give you an exact time.
No, but did the Israeli Defense Ministry contact DoD officials and confirm that, or did you guys learn that from press reports?
We were contacted by the Israeli Ministry of Defense.
Okay. And then I just wanted to ask, so the department, do you expect to be informed ahead of the, you mentioned the conversations will continue. Do you expect to be informed of the nature and the timing of the strike or the retaliation against Iran before that occurs?
Appreciate the question, Jared. Again, we're in constant communication with the Israeli government at different levels, including the Secretary to Minister Gallant. We're going to keep talking to them about their response. I'm just not going to be able to get into more details beyond that. Brad.
Yeah, thanks. Just one question. So now that Israel is operating inside of Lebanon and Israel and Iran are basically trading strikes, are we in that wider war that you've been trying to prevent, or do you still assess that it's contained?
We still assess it as contained. What we are seeing is limited operations on that northern border to clear that Hezbollah infrastructure to allow Israeli citizens to get back into that northern area. This has not spread out into a wider regional conflict. I understand the implication of your question, but it still has been contained to Gaza. They still have a right to conduct operations against Hezbollah, which a year from today, looking back, Hezbollah started launching rockets towards Israel. So yes, our assessment is that this conflict still remains contained, and we are doing everything from our perspective to ensure that it does remain contained and that the message of deterrence is still sent far and wide. And that's why you've seen us rotate out different carriers through the region, We still have the ARGMU in the Eastern Mediterranean. We have flown in different capabilities. We have a lot of power in the region, and we will use that if needed to protect U.S. forces. And should we see another attack from Iran, we will also come to the defense of Israel.
Previously, you were saying if it moved into Lebanon, it would be a wider war. You were trying to prevent that. So how is that not?
We still do not assess that this is a wider war, though. What they are doing is clearing and creating I'm trying to think of the right words, but a zone in which they can safely get their citizens back who have been displaced from the attacks that Hezbollah started launching on October 8th. Again, that was the next day following a brutal terrorist attack that killed, many innocent people. And following that day that also, we still have hostages in Gaza. So they have every right to go after, a terrorist organization that is on their border that started launching attacks on October 8th. And I might remind you that these same terrorists that, started those attacks on October 8th, some of them are responsible also for the death of Americans. So I think it's time to just put things in perspective here. The war is still, as we assess, it's still contained. Did I see a question over here? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. You may have seen published reports that Israel has now several dozen military vehicles and an unknown number of troops adjacent to or surrounding the UNIFIL, United Nations peacekeeping force in southern Lebanon. What is the Pentagon's view of this apparently intimidating behavior by the Israelis, and has the Pentagon warned the Israelis to keep their to not attack that base with its approximately 300 Irish soldiers?
I haven't seen those reports, so I'm sorry. You're reading it to me as I'm up here. I'm not aware of this. What I can tell you is what I know, in that they are conducting operations along that northern border that has infrastructure that Hezbollah uses. I'm going to let you reach out to the Israeli government to speak on behalf of their own operations. I can just give you a very top-level assessment of what they have told us. Yes, in the back.
Are you tracking any reports by Hisbah that credible threats that they would attack deeper into Israel? And if so, is there any reaction or thinking about that?
So I'm not going to speak to intelligence assessments, but we have seen them launch, attacks previously from within Lebanon that, could be assessed to reach deeper into Israel that have been, intercepted by Israeli air defenses. But I just don't have a wider assessment for you. Did I see one more here?
Yes. I wanted to follow on from Jen's question. So
Sure.
The Command Center for America's, might be argued, most dynamic region, CENTCOM, MacDill, it's been shut down, disrupted, at least moved 6,000 personnel or more. Is there a sort of dedicated fallback facility for those instances? I know it was shut down for Helene as well, or Helene. And then secondly, can MacDill itself, does it have the defenses to withstand a storm of this magnitude?
I think those are great questions, Charlie, and I don't want to give you the wrong information. I honestly just don't have that here. I would refer you to MacDill to speak to that. What I can tell you is we're never going to allow our operations around the world to be disrupted. So there will be a continuity. Command and control will still be, operational. The missions will still continue wherever they are around the world. CENTCOM has, purview over. But for more specifics on the center that Jen, asked about, I would just refer you to CENTCOM or to speak to that, as I just don't have those operational details in front of me. But what I can tell you is I know that some people are evacuating, obviously, because of the storm. We want to make sure our personnel are taken care of. But for more on the facility itself, I'd refer you to MacDill to speak to that.
General Kurilla back at CENTCOM?
I believe so. Yeah. Okay, I got one and then two, and then we'll wrap up. Yeah.
In advance of Hurricane Milton, how many active duty forces or equipment is on standby, ready to deploy if needed, called upon?
Sure. So already we have 5,000 National Guard that are already mobilized. In terms of Hurricane Milton, there's already been preparatory action that's been taken that I sort of read out at the top, but we have pre-positioned helicopters for search and rescue operations. We have high water vehicles for search and rescue and commodities distribution. There are personnel to help with logistics support and additional search and rescue operations. So we're doing things that, or the National Guard, I should say, is doing things to be in place and to be ready to support, almost immediately. And for more, I'd, refer you to Florida to speak to that. Fadi, last one?
In terms of putting things in perspective, the UN and Lebanese authorities just, saying 1,500 Lebanese civilians have been killed only in the last 2 weeks since this Israeli operation started. 1.2 million of the population are displaced, which is almost a quarter of the population. Israel yesterday issued new warnings, basically laying siege to Lebanese waters from the Awali River to the south, which is 60 kilometers deep. Tens of evacuation orders from the southern parts of Lebanon, striking in Tripoli in the north, Beirut every night, Bekaa in the east, Saida on the coastal. Does this sound like a limited operation in its impact? And we heard a lot from you here on the podium that the Israeli operation in Gaza, in Rafah, was limited. And now we know almost 40% of that city was destroyed. How is that operation, from your perspective, and Lebanon is limited, if the impact is so devastating on the country?
Fadi, what I can tell you is that, we understand that there's certainly been impacts to civilians, and civilians have been displaced. There have been, whether it be in Gaza or in Lebanon, there are civilians that are getting caught in the battle space. And that is something that we have continuously urged the Israelis when they are conducting their operations. They have to take into account civilians. We are not on the ground conducting these operations. So again, I can't speak to the operations itself. I can just speak to what we are here doing at the department and what we're going to continue to do. And the Secretary is going to continue to impress upon Minister Gallant that civilians need to be accounted for in the battle space. In terms of their operations, from what we understand, Fadi, it is still limited. We're going to have a conversation at some point with Minister Gallant more about what these operations look like, but our understanding is that they are limited and constricted to that border, northern border area, and we're going to keep. These are very direct conversations between two people, and we're going to continue to have them. Okay, thanks everyone.